So on behalf of University for Life, let me welcome you to the second annual Creativity and Culture Conference. My name is Dr. Jesvia Mahil and I'm the director of University for Life. It's an education consultancy and we specialize in development of creativity skills. How about you, Paul? Could you please introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm happy to be here. Paul Rosenberg. I'm a transformational leadership coach and consultant. I work with startups all the way to multinationals. I also am a professional stand-up comic and an ex-improvisational actor, so I'm very interested in the humor side of things and how that translates into the creativity space.
Okay, excellent. And Peter, yourself, please.
Hey, great to be here as well. My name is Peter Griffiths. I'm a creative coach. I've got a background in music and actually uniquely also decades in corporate working for tech companies as well. I know it's a bit cliche, but actually I'm sitting in the middle, you know, this left, right side brain thing. Well, I can tell you now it's easy to sit right in the middle of it. So you can be deeply creative, but you can also have a total structure around it and have, you know, a decent background in terms of corporate as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter. And Phil?
I'm a founder director of a software company called ThoughtSpace, and we're heavily involved in the idea of stimulating creativity. My background is building businesses from scratch. I've been doing it all my life, and being creative and innovative is kind of instilled in me.
Michelle, let's go on to you then.
Sure. Hi, I have a company, the Center for Creative Emergence, for the past 24 years. It's dedicated to applied creativity, applied improvisational theater, and applied storytelling with leaders, teams, entrepreneurs, and organizations. And like Paul, I have a long background in improv theater, and so I weave it into my work. I do a lot of improv-based and arts-based facilitation and training.
Okay, excellent. And Harry, how about yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm a mindset, resilience, health and well-being coach and speaker. So I work with both individuals, professionals, coaches and consultants, as well as large organizations on what I call self-leadership and really becoming the best self-leader you can through optimizing yourself mentally, physically, emotionally and spiritually, based out of here in London. And my company is also called The Thought Gym. And a bit like Paul, actually, I did a few years ago, I did have a little round of stand-up comedy way back when, and did the circuit in London for about 7 gigs, just as part of a bit of fun, really, to challenge myself a little bit. But yeah, I work with individuals and organizations to help boost their energy levels, their health, vitality, and productivity.
Hi, everyone. Lovely to be part of this. I guess I'm a product of all of this as a physicist once, but also a practicing artist, then worked for about 20 years with institutions and kids, trying to take the fear out of science, linking all these things. I'm a great believer that innovation doesn't happen between 10 and 12 on a Tuesday. It's an entire way of leading your life, really. And I'm a massive dopamine ideas junkie, so it's wonderful to be surrounded by others like me. And I just want that for everyone else, because I believe that art certainly can change the world, science, and that's why I'm here. I'm hoping that we can change things for the better. Okay. Thank you, Jesvia.
All right, sorry for, I didn't mean to leave you out. I thought
that's all right.
I'm just looking at my pictures here, and you're the first on that line of pictures, so for that reason. So my role here is just to stimulate a conversation between the 6 of you who I've had the privilege to interview, and I know that you're all experts in your field, and you've done a lot of great work in creativity. So I'll just ask some simple questions to trigger off a conversation, and we'll see how many questions we get through during the course of the next 25 minutes or so. So let me start with a question for Paul. Paul, you talk a lot about humor. You know, you do improv and you associate humor with creativity. How do you create a space for creativity through humor, Paul?
I think humor is multifaceted in that way, but I think there's about three key points. First of all, on the stress side, humor tends to be a good way to reduce stress. And the way my mind works, I'm like 5 years down the road usually. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen next week, next year, 5 years from now? And so the humor bit is a way to kind of relax the mind from my view and lower that stress and get into a good space that you're really present in the moment. And I think that's where the great ideas and innovations come from, is really being present and being able to listen to yourself. I think the second thing that I found with humor is that it creates a connection between you and that other person or that group. It's a way to create some trust and some space. And a lot of the times I think we tell ourselves, oh, I'm not creative. We push ourselves and put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So the humor kind of acts as a way to create some trust and some authenticity there. And the final one, obviously, and I know those of you involved in improv and stand-up, once you get into the humor mode, again, you're in a play mode. And for me, the play process begins to unleash all those great impulses and wonderful ideas. So I think those are the three biggest ones.
Okay, and Phil, you specialize in lateral thinking. Like, is there some sort of connection? Does humor enable lateral thinking in some way?
For me, it does. I think it breaks down a lot of barriers, because whatever that is, I mean, as a comic and facing a hostile crowd, sometimes, they're there to, hey, make me laugh. That mechanism of creating a space where it is natural, there's some structure behind it, but to allow that space to be filled with whatever it is, I think is really important for the creative process. So I absolutely agree with you. I think it's a way to create an environment where you have that free flow and no judgment, and from that space comes the great ideas.
Okay, Phil, any comments on that?
Well, yes, I think when you're in a frame of mind where humor is prevalent, you're in a much more relaxed state, and the mind can pop up with those aha moments that we're all we think of as being particularly valuable, that seem to just pop out of nowhere. So your state of mind is really important if you want to stimulate lateral thinking, new ideas. And yeah, I can see in an environment where there's a lot of humor involved, putting you into that frame of mind. What we do with our software is try to create that kind of situation with, although it's not a humorous sort of environment, it's certainly a compelling, immersive environment. It's like 3D mind mapping. And it's, yeah, I think it's a fun environment. And I think what Paul was talking about really is a fun environment. If you create a fun environment, it allows for a lot more of that kind of those sort of aha moments and insights to pop into your head. But you've got to notice them.
Right. Okay. And Jasmine, comments on that?
Interesting listening to all of that, because it's all about play, which I'm a great believer in. That's what I learned from working with children for so long. They don't care if their trees are purple and they go over the edge and things like that. And unfortunately, at some point through the journey, somebody says, "Oh, you don't want to do it like that." So for me, it's also about thinking, what I call thinking with hands. So that idea of when you're doing something else, when you're immersed in something else, you do allow your subconscious, because I'm a great believer that we actually have all the answers. We just have to allow them to surface. But yeah, the idea of play, risk taking, not worrying again, when I'm starting as an artist, whenever I'm starting a new body of work, whenever I'm starting with new materials, I haven't got a clue how they're going to work. And I have to kind of park the fact that I might have been good at something before and just go, do you know what, I'll just go with this and see where it goes. And invariably the best work you ever make is when you're not trying, if that makes any sense. But as Phil said, one of the biggest things is we do have ideas constantly, but it's being aware of those and picking up on the fact that that seemingly really maybe daft idea is actually the solution to the problem that you're kind of trying to solve.
Okay, great. And Peter?
Yeah, I like what you said there, Jasmine, about being at play. In terms of the ideas, I mean, if you can get into a state where you're really present, if you look behind me, there's a load of machines. That's actually a live show that I'm working on at the moment. I have no idea what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks, but that's where the magic happens, or the sweet spot. I literally just let go and I improvise until I come up with a 45-minute set. And I think that's pretty much the best way to do it. If you can clear your mind completely, I mean, you can have a really good basic starting point, that's no problem. But after that, I don't really care, if that makes sense. I just completely let go. I'm almost, you could say, like a conduit. I'm like a satellite to creativity, really.
Okay, great. And Michelle?
Yeah, I love what everyone is saying, and I would add that when you use improv, or you get people in their natural childlike state, in their natural fun state, and that creates an environment of receptivity and accessibility to their creative process. And a lot of times people will go, well, how does improv relate to our everyday work or the real world work we have to do? And it fits very nicely in the creative process in divergence. It opens the field for divergence. It's the improv principles create a container like yes and, make everyone look good. So it creates an environment of safety. And then when you go into convergence, that's when you start to pick out the ideas that will work or are workable or doable. And so I find that just improv or humor play is a great way to get people in a safe way into a place where they can just explore and discover, and they're safe to do it without judgment. And they can mine for more ideas and more insights, and then they can converge to find out what's really workable or relevant or applicable.
Okay, great. And Harry?
Yeah, I think it's all really interesting what I've heard so far, and play actually does play a big part in one of my models for framework for energy and vitality. And humor, again, once you get into that humorous state, that playful state, it drops the guard, it drops the adulthood. And a lot of the teachings that I get are from children anyway. Children and nature tend to be my biggest teachers, because we don't have these filters that aren't built up so much. And like you say, yeah, somewhere between the ages of 4 to 10, things start to change a little bit, and we're told to draw inside of the lines and things. And we lose that ability to some degree to just relax and let go. And so I do make it a conscious effort to do things which will bring either humor or play back into my life. And a lot of that's with the physical movement. And I recognize that when I'm not in that space enough, I need to spend more time around my nieces. They're like 4 and 6 years old. And we just, you know, even last week I was babysitting them. We just played dress up. Literally. And so you get into that playful state. I was putting on, to some degree anyway, their, you know, Alice in Wonderland dresses around my neck, because obviously I'm not going to fit into them, but just to kind of be open to that. And you know, from a corporate perspective, I used to work at the London Stock Exchange and Accenture, and we can get caught up in this idea of being a certain way. And actually at our essence is really how we are when we're children. We have all the answers when we're children, and unfortunately society, adults, we tend to kind of muddle that a little bit. If you look at children, they know how to forgive easily, they know how to forget easily, they know how to be creative effortlessly, they know how to breathe effortlessly. Okay, so we have all the answers then. And I think by spending time around those, you know, children and getting into your own childlike state, it will drop the guard, it releases the cortisol, it releases the stress, and you're able to then float a little bit more. So I'm all in favor for it. Yeah, of course.
You know, Harry, when you talk about children, it reminded me of the very shocking statistic that we've been hearing in the news lately, that 1 in 4 children are self-harming these days. You know, like, what is the difference between children who are naturally playful and children who nowadays are becoming very serious to the extent that they are engaging in self-harming? That 1 in 4 statistic was quite shocking. That's in the UK.
I think the environment at the end of the day, I think like we're all born, you know, with, you know, only say 2 fears, fear of loud noises and falling, I think it is. And everything else is conditioned onto us effectively. So, you know, these statistics, I mean, I guess in my view anyway, it's got to be coming from the environment, what they're seeing, what they're observing, what they're experiencing, which is leading them to that. Okay. Like at their base level, I think we're all pretty much the same. We all have the same kind of basic needs and wants, and so I think personally, I think it's got to be an environmental issue that leads that, and therefore that needs to be addressed. But you know,
I think it is an environmental issue, but I think it's to do with the environment where the young child, particularly under age 4, is relating to their parents. I think I've done a lot of study around attachment theory, and it's really clear that, I mean, if you go out and about nowadays, you see parents with children where the parents are spending 0 time engaging with the children. They've got their face buried in their iPhone or whatever phone device they're using, and kids are mucking around by themselves, and there's no engagement. And I think that generation is causing these problems of child mental health, and that without some sort of intervention to reverse that, I just don't know what's going to happen, because we're storing up all sorts of issues where children are. But children, as we were saying earlier, are very inventive and creative, but we don't want that creativity to become criminal creativity. And I think that if we can have a closer examination of child mental health, I think it would help to resolve that.
Can I also add that children's environment tends to be rather sanitized now? I always try and encourage them. So many parents go, oh, but I don't want to do that. That's going to be messy. I go, where do you think good stuff comes from? It comes from chaos. And the problem, of course, if you're trying to limit them into a screen where, yes, they're very nice and tidy and you know what they're doing, there's no opportunity for them to create something new. And I definitely, having worked with so many kids, it's about self-esteem as well. And when they're little and they bring something home, and it could be just the most simple little thing out of clay or whatever, they're so proud of it. So this is why I keep going back to this phrase, thinking with hands. It's about doing. And as much as I love screens, and I think they will help us solve so many other problems, you still have to get down to that fundamental sort of brain-hand relationship without a screen in the middle. I always say this to my students: when you have an idea, jot it on a piece of paper. Don't use a screen in the middle, because something disconnects. So it's about allowing kids just to make a mess. And I'm not sure that a lot of modern parents want to do that anymore.
No. Yeah, I see the difference between some of my nieces as well, in how they are creative.
Good point.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, because some parents think, oh, well, I need that screen now to give myself 10 minutes or 15 minutes of peace or whatever. But actually, one of my other nieces, she's also 4 years old. She hasn't grown up with any screen. I mean, she knows how to use an iPad if it's there, but it's not ever visible with the parents. So you take her to a restaurant or on a plane or whatever, and give her a piece of paper and a pen and she'll be happy. Give her a stick and she'll make something out of it. So she doesn't really need it. But then as soon as a screen is introduced, because say her cousins are default to that mechanism, then suddenly she gets lost and her brain turns into mush, and she gets on that dopamine hit and all of that other stuff. So just conscious, you've got to be consciously aware of what these things are doing, and they're designed to sap attention. They're designed effectively to kind of keep us in an addictive state. So yeah, we just have to be cautious and use it for the way that suits us, serves us, and not kind of hinders us in any way.
Yeah, and our conventional education system is designed more for maintenance and obedience and compliance than it is for creativity. So a lot of times, a lot of the most creative kids, the ones who don't fit neatly in the box and who are most original and innovative, get labeled as somehow deficit or something wrong with them, when oftentimes it is that the teachers were not socialized. They don't know how to facilitate creative process from children. They aren't trained to facilitate or draw forth, bring out the creativity of a lot of these kids, or the parents aren't. Most of us were not socialized, educated into doing that. Many people were traumatized out of their natural creativity. So part of what happens is you see some of the most genius, brilliant, inventive kids get labeled as something wrong with them when society just hasn't caught up to creating the containers and creating the education system that can support them thriving creatively. Because a lot of it is that society has a deficit, not just these kids.
Yeah, I actually agree with that, Michelle, because as a kid, I had a really troubling time in school as a deeply creative kid. However, it didn't really damage me. It kind of spurred me on because the teachers were kind of like, yeah, you're not really going to get a job. You're not going to do this and that. And I actually went the other way and I said, I'll show you. The cool thing is now, I mean, I know education's in the media quite a lot at the moment because I don't know about lots of different countries. I'm based in Germany. I know Germany and the UK, a lot of teachers are turning their back on education, which really breaks my heart. But actually some really cool things are happening at the moment where there's actually academies being set up. I've got a friend who's a coaching colleague. She's just gone back into teaching, just this September. And she sent me pictures of, the school, and it was a completely different ball game. They were building like a Berlin Wall within the whole school. The classrooms looked like a castle. They were lit. So it wasn't like they were letting them run riot, but the kids were getting what they needed. But they were also getting the structure and the lessons, as the math and the science and all the rest of it. But anything that they were deeply creative in, the teachers...
Was that a state-funded academy? Sorry, Peter, was that a state-funded academy?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure if it's state-funded or private, because actually I'm going to go back to her in the next couple of weeks, because I said I would love to do an interview with her for our group as well, for the company I run as well, called The Mind Takeaway, because we're really looking at where creativity has been nurtured, especially for children. Because it breaks my heart that the normal general education system, as you said, Michelle, teachers are just not equipped. They're not really trained. Parents are told, not to get deeply creative, and they're totally second what everyone's saying about, we want this structure. We're too scared to get messy and just go back to. I mean, the digital side's an issue. I do get that. But it's
and Peter, can I? There's one thing which is really, really close to my heart, obviously as a physicist once as well. When they talk about the future of jobs and the future of, what our children are going to go into, I, for one, am quite happy that robots will be doing all the jobs that I don't want to do. But there'll be a great big chasm, and creative thinking is the thing that's going to fill that. And I think if we could communicate to education that actually creativity isn't simply getting messy or anything, but it's coming up with solutions to the major global problems that we have. If you allow kids to be more creative, they will solve these problems with the machines that are coming. That, I think, is one of the ways that we could get it into education. And like you, it breaks my heart because we are still educating our kids for an industrial revolution that happened 200 years ago. We are not educating them for...
Yeah, which is completely crazy. It doesn't make sense, 1900 factory style education. And we're still pushing it in the 21st century. And I liked what people were saying. I think of you, Harry, you're a parent as well.
No, so I'm an uncle. I'm an uncle, not a parent.
Sorry, an uncle. Yeah, so it's...
So I'm just to say, I'm a grandparent, and so I can see across several generations at a very deep personal level. I'm really concerned that we as adults need to take responsibility. I don't think we can be thinking in terms at all of our children. It's great that we can help children to be creative and hope that by doing that they will be able to resolve some of the problems of the world. But we have a responsibility to do that right now. We're running out of time. There should be a real urgency to solve things like the Sustainable Development Goals, for example. I mean, without resolving those issues as adults in networks and by collaborating, it's going to be too late for these children. I'm really concerned that, yeah, I have grandchildren that they're 8 years and 10 years old and don't use screens, and they've become extremely creative, and it's wonderful. But in the meantime, we've got to get on with resolving some of these really big problems. And I think that using creativity, tapping into the creativity that we all have in order to solve those problems has to be a priority for those of us who are in that space.
Okay, so I'm just conscious of the time, and you know, we've got so much more to say. One of the things that I wanted to say is that in the UK, for example, it's politicians that make decisions about education. It's not educators. And in countries where education is a lot better, for example, in Finland, it's not the politicians that are making decisions about education, it's the educators themselves. So that's one thing that we need to look at. But final points then, just to round up, and then remember that we will have monthly follow-up sessions on the third Saturday of each month at 9 AM, 2 PM and 7 PM to cater for all the different time zones that we've got involved in this conference. So final points now before we end.
Well, I think one of the things I heard was it Phil say about helping children become more creative. I think actually we just need to help them not lose that creativity, because I think we get in the way a lot. I think like inherently we're creative and we just as adults need to get out of the way. But in terms of adults changing and being able to come up with creative solutions to today's problems, I like Einstein's quotes about, you know, you can't solve a problem on the same level of thinking that created it. And that's what needs to change. So that might even be a bigger ask though. If you're asking the generation that maybe created the problems to then somehow change that problem, because it will take a different level of thinking and education that does that. So I think there's that in between, the kind of the 20s to 40-year-olds that are kind of coming through and pushing an agenda through. And you know, if you watch a few TED Talks, you watch a few ideas, and actually you will see that there are so many people who are coming up with creative solutions to solve, you know, issues of the rubbish in the ocean. I was reading about yesterday, the guy, the 16-year-old or whoever it was that got funding for creating that big net that manages to pull the rubbish out the ocean without damaging the fish or something like that. So I think we are seeing that, and I don't think you know, whether you're 16 or 60, you know, you can come up with the solutions. It's age is just a number for that perspective.
Okay, well, brilliant. Well,